Welcome to GTM, get the money live. I'm Chris Ryan and I'm Leopard. Reload your hosts and we're here to install the operating system for your revenue. We're moving past the theory and getting into the high stakes execution of what it takes to scale in 2020 fast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome out to GTM Get the Money Live. I am excited. Another new show and another great guest today. This show, if you've never tuned in before, is all about solving revenue problems for leaders, C-suite, any business that's struggling with revenue problems, but it's to the end of solving revenue for good and revenue for growth. We want to make sure that we help companies that are going to give back to this world. And in line with that thought process, I have a great guest today. I'd like to introduce Marc Sabatini. Marc, please tell us a little something about you and welcome.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris, and thank you for having me on the show. My background, I've been in enterprise sales, leadership, and individual contributor for about 30 years now in the advertising and marketing technology space. And I've successfully launched a few companies and have had the experience of being essentially a founder of a startup where, as an individual, you have to figure out what your go-to-market is, drive revenue, and build a successful and scalable business. So everything that you're talking about in your series is true to my heart. It's always about driving net new revenue for businesses.
I was looking at your LinkedIn, and I don't want to say it's almost verbatim, aside from the experience of how we look at and solve problems. And then I met you obviously through the GTM Partner Network. We're all part of the GTM OS crew. It's been really great to see you. I love meeting with people, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it feels like you have a very sales approach. You're looking at bottom line results. You're looking at how revenue gets through the business and then ends up to like real impact on businesses. Is that fair to say?
It is. At the end of the day, whether it's net new revenue to a business or growth in existing customers, it all comes down to what many people refer to as sales. For me, it's always been about solving problems. So, if you would ask me what my why is, it's I want to help people. And I have been very fortunate to work in an industry with technology that I'm passionate about. And when I talk to people, I can start to understand what their challenges are and apply the solutions I have to drive the outcomes that solve their problem. And I think if more B2B organizations look at their world through that lens, they'll never be selling anything. They'll always be solving problems, and revenue will actually grow faster. And the lifetime value of each one of those customers will last longer. And what I've been able to stitch together over the last, I want to say almost 4 years that I've been either a part of or passionate about the go-to-market partners 8-pillar operating system is that it is a system, right? It's all of these components together. It's not just sales. It's the teamwork that sales, marketing, and customer success has to have. And now over the last couple of years, it's how does revenue operations line up into that to bring a lot of those hidden gems to the surface so that companies can move faster and get themselves unstuck, whether they're a startup or a well-established company that's plateaued and can't find a way to grow.
Makes a lot of sense. And I love that you started with you like to help people, because I think that's what this show is about. Like, a lot of people look at revenue that are outside the business world as maybe a dirty word. And I think at the end of the day, revenue does solve a lot of problems. Again, if you're bringing revenue to good people, which hopefully most people are, and totally understand the go-to-market approach, your history, your acumen. We talked a little bit before the show, and we talked a lot about misalignment, and we talked about things. You were like, well, I was like, what are the revenue stoppers? What prevents companies from growing revenue? And you said, well, it could be their ICP. It could be their positioning. It could be the marketing to sales handoff. It could be the lack of process. And it kept coming back to alignment. And I feel like every guest we've had, we talk either about one of those things, multiple of those things, but it's always broken alignment. And I was telling our producer before, it's interesting to me that we all have slightly different perspectives, but we're all trying to solve the same problem. And when I was speaking with you, you mentioned there's a proven process. Is that the GTM process? Is that the Marc Sabatini process? Can you talk about that a little bit?
It's a combination because it's the foundation and the educational side of it comes from frameworks that I've over the years have learned and applied and taken back experience from the applications over the years. But at the end of the day, it's understanding who my customer is, that B2B organization, what their product is, what their market is, and really go in and focus on that transformation for them. Because while the go-to-market partners operating system, for example, is designed and has its 8 pillars and could come in at any one of those given points, the outcome at the end of the day is very custom to that business that we're working with. Right. It's different because it's a different product, a different market. There are different times within their growth cycle. The human beings in the organization and the ideas they've had have all positioned them at a certain point. Because at the end of the day, it's really about, the gap between how the market experiences you and how you operate internally. And there are times where when you look at one company and compare it to 3 other companies in that space and say, those companies are growing and you're not growing, but you've got a solid product. And when we look at your market, there's companies out there who have the problems that need the outcomes you deliver. It really comes down to how the market is experiencing you. And in that situation, we can then apply these tools to say, maybe this is more of a messaging problem. Perhaps when we look at the revenue intelligence from all of the conversations we've had and the way salespeople outline their journey, it's about how often they're bringing in multiple constituents at that prospect instead of single threading it, or how soon do they bring procurement in to understand the value you bring to the table. So there's a lot. It's really is about the mix, but it comes down to that specific company, the product they have, how they're going to market, and how the market's going to experience that business. So that's really where the heart of the transformation needs to come from.
It always seems so simple in my mind to align departments and functions and put everybody on the same page. But it's funny, guest after guest, time after time, when we go into organizations, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, whether you're an enterprise or whether you're an SMB. But where do you start? So you come in, so someone hires you. Like, is it after the fact that, let me back up. Is it after the fact they hire you when they realize the market is not experiencing them well? Like, are they in a downturn, or are they seeing their competitors thrive? Like, when do they bring you in?
The number one answer is too late. In many situations, companies tend to wait too long. They believe that they know the answers, but the challenges that are going on in these 4 to 5 years since COVID is that organizations are getting smaller due to financial pressure because they're not growing their top line revenue, because they're not preventing churn within their existing customers and leveraging those existing customers to grow. So because they're a tighter organization and limited resources, everybody's doing so much work. For these last couple of years, what external learning is that executive team, or quite frankly, anybody in the organization, doing to understand the changes in the market dynamics? How have buyers changed? How do buyers research the products they think they need to solve their problems? And are you in that line of fire to at least be recognized? Percent of executives are using social and other sources to determine who they want to talk to before they ever talk to a salesperson. So it really is that organization of sales, marketing, and customer success, because these are the executives at your customers as well. So if you did your ICP correct, and you focused on businesses that just didn't need that one product from you today, but you saw that they fit the profile where they'll grow over time because they have many problems that you can help them solve. It's really up to your customer success team to be in front of them, doing active listening to hear for these other ideas or challenges that the company's trying to solve, and raise their hand. Otherwise, you're depending on your business floating to the top in some executive or some other person in the organization doing research to say, who should we talk to try to solve this problem?
I feel like companies they're stuck kind of, and they maybe that they're not not trying to evolve, but they're running old playbooks, right? So you mentioned COVID. You mentioned people are bringing you in too late. And from my experience, when you walk into a company, they're executing something that was popular in 2015, right? Let's go leads heavy, get as much as possible. That's going to solve as many problems as we can solve. Bringing in net new logos is the way to grow the business. And you've said multiple times, even in the short conversation thus far, that maybe it's not. Maybe it's about growing your existing customer base. Go to market in general. Like I think you and I probably had multiple conversations about this. It's about building a sustainable business and having scalability. And that comes from net new and it comes from existing clients. Do you start with ICP? Because I feel like most of the GTMers I talk to and fractionals I speak with start there.
I start with an assessment, and I really start to understand where the challenges are in the organization. Whether you're an SMB or a larger company, we want to be working with the CEO. Many of us talk about how the CEO has to own go-to-market, but it's really, in my opinion, the CRO or another leader in the organization who needs to execute on it on a daily basis. And coming in and understanding what the company looks like, an assessment across many different parts of the organization, because often, whether it's the CEO or a board member or potentially an investor, that triggered something for the conversation to happen with you or me, is that they said, you know what your problem is in this business? It's this. This is the problem. And they'll say it's sales or it's marketing or it's CS or it's how you're bringing all your information together or how you're onboarding customers. Whatever that challenge is, what they often fail to recognize is that there's 2 or 3 dependencies that have to be fixed or solved before they could ever solve that problem. So we could be all hands on deck to solve the problem, but if we don't fix the dependencies, and that could be just internal process, it could be learning and development. I mean, how many companies actually stop and take an objective look through an objective competency assessment tool to say, how competent are the people in my organization? Now, competency often comes across as a bad word, right? The reason why I'm doing this if I'm the CEO is because I want to fire people. Well, that's not right. It's about how do I understand where I need to invest my limited capital to train and educate the team on what's different in the marketplace. What are the competitors doing? How is my product fitting? What do I need to do to advance that? And today, if you actually turn around and take a look inside your organization, all these great people that are a part of the fabric of your business may actually be 80% at the competency level they need to be at to operate efficiently today. And the only thing that's missing is learning and development. And I'm not saying that it's 100% on the business to do all the training. It's up to every individual in the organization to be a part of a self-learning culture where we all want to go out and learn what's new and bring that information back to the organization. So if we do the assessments up front, whether it's how all the salespeople are handling their cadence, what's the workload that marketing's doing, right? How often do the marketing teams do all this activity, but the output's not really producing the next step? We have to ask the CS teams, are you doing active listening when you're in your conversations talking about an implementation or a deployment? And then ultimately, how do you bring all this back in your RevOps system so that your product team can actually learn from the voice of the customer to say, what's the next product advancement we have to do? What's broken? Are we actually looking at all the, the tickets that are coming in if it were a software company or a technology company to say, where are the challenges? Everything comes back to that key point that we talked about. What's the market experience to your brand? And if the market experience is, they talk a good game, but we always have challenges delivering, that's an underlying, dependency that has to be solved and addressed before you'll ever fix one of the other main problems.
I like that you said you didn't go right to ICP. And just unpack that a little, because that was great. And there was a lot there. There's some key takeaways there. And I think if people are familiar or not familiar with the go-to-market world, the CEO certainly, he or she needs to own this, because if they're not bought in, it doesn't matter. Nobody, no one's maybe not going to fall in line. But you're right. When you start saying, you mentioned, which we refer to as like the 5 valleys of death. If the functions are doing things on their own, they're not working together. They all have their own agenda. And then if they're responsible to some leader or CEO that is looking at the wrong data, then it's just like marketing. I'm a marketer, right? Look at all these great impressions. Like, what does that mean for revenue? Not much, right? It means influence. And sales are going to say, well, I made all these calls. And without asking the questions that I think you're asking, well, were those calls valuable? You mentioned customer success. Are you actively listening? Like, what are you hearing? Are you listening for upserve, upsell opportunities? You mentioned that 80% of the people are competent enough to execute when you come in. So they have the right people, but without the assessments, they don't know that. Is that what you're referring to?
Say the other way around. We have a great team of people in the organization who are passionate about what we do, and they're doing 150% effort on moving the ball forward. But when you look at each individual's level of competency to do the job that they're there to do, without ongoing learning and development, their competency is lower than it needs to be. Because if we're learning more about how to be the best customer success rep or salesperson or marketer or product lead, now all of a sudden the company has a higher output because we're more efficient. Businesses today want to hire force multipliers, right? They want to bring somebody in who's an athlete. I mean, all these terms we hear because they believe they're hiring somebody who's at 100%. Plus, they can bring all this other stuff to the table. But if you bring that person into an organization where the balance of the team around them is lower in each one of their individual competencies to get the job done, you find yourself with that force multipliers now on more calls than they need to be on. They're in more meetings than they need to be on because they're backfilling the competency gap that's there across the organization. So your force multiplier is no longer multiplying anymore. Right. You should be able to go into a call, especially today with call recordings and transcripts, where if I'm in a customer success meeting, do I really need 2 or 3 people from my team on that? If it's a product call and my customer success lead, or I'm selling something and my salesperson wants somebody from product or a technical sales engineer on the call, why? It's the first call. It's the second call. Why do they want to be there? Because they don't really understand the product they're selling. So the competency could just be on why did we build this? What are we all here for? What do we deliver? How does this done? Your business is one of these 5 core components within the ICP, and you, Mr. and Mrs. YZ, are this persona. Like, this is all education and learning so that when the salesperson or the customer success person comes to the call, they're educated and they feel confident about what they're doing. That's a training issue. Otherwise, the business has 3 or 4 people on every call. And at the same time, we're reducing the size of our workforce. And ultimately that math leads to reduced output for the business.
I totally agree. And I think I love that you said training. Do you find that most companies, when you walk into them, they have training programs, they're trying to learn, or are they learning the wrong things maybe?
No, I think there's a gap in the investment that businesses are making around learning. But like I said before, it's not 100% on the business. It's not 100% on the CEO. Each one of us needs to go out and do something to learn something new every day. And I believe that. I've lived that in my life. I believe all the time. I always want to learn something new every day. And if it's 11:30 at night and I haven't learned anything new today, that's not the time of day I want to learn something new. So force yourself to go out and ask a question. And today with all these, AI tools and models at our fingertips, just start asking questions and learning. I had a very, a startup that I did in 2018. It was a very technical business, and my co-founder, very technical in the approach. So as I was bringing salespeople on the team or customer success leads, you'd see them listening on a call, and you could start to see the eyes glass over, right, with some of the technical conversation or some of the words that were put out. And afterwards, I would ask the question. I said, were there things on that conversation that you didn't understand? And they're like, yeah. I said, well, write them down and either ask me for the answer or go do your own research and get educated on what this means. You should get to a point, in the not so distant future where you're getting on calls and it's rare for something to come up that you don't understand. You need to be an active, facilitator in these conversations for the business to grow. And that all comes from, wanting to learn. And if you go this approach as the CEO and you set up this this process of understanding competency and applying capital to do more learning and development, you're going to learn, the number one thing you're going to learn is who wants to learn in your organization and who's done learning, right? I don't know if you've met anybody like this, but there are people who believe that they've experienced enough and they don't want to learn anything new. They know how to do it. And then the second piece is, you're in each one of those categories, you're going to learn who can learn and who has trouble learning. And I'll spend all the time in the world with the person who wants to learn and is having trouble learning to get them to learn. And if you do that, your business is going to accelerate.
Right. When we hire specifically, we run like hiring assessments, we'll call them employee assessments. And that's one thing we always look for. One of our core values is 1%, like try to be 1% better every single day. And we're looking for scientifically, mathematically, people that are ranked as high theoreticals. We're looking for those continual learners. So it's really interesting. We went down this road, but I think that is so helpful to understand, because you can teach a lot of people a lot of things, but if they're not willing to learn and they're not eager to learn, it's never going to work. I think flipping the script a little bit, when you tie in go to market, when you tie in bringing the functions together, I think one of the things you probably deliver is clarity, and you probably give empowerment, and you probably give them a perspective that they haven't seen before. Product is a good example. Product's at the table. Like, guys, you are informing who we're building product for, and then sales or marketing are having conversations. If those things don't align, we got to get on the same page so that we're building for our best buyers, that sales are selling for our best buyers, that marketing is attracting the best buyers. It's just it's a nice aha moment for siloed teams to have that clarity. I assume you come in mostly fractional, right? You come in, I don't want to say you fix businesses, but you help them overcome challenges and then you exit. Is that fair to say?
Exit or stay on, an advisory role. And look, because change never stops and it's happening at a higher frequency today than ever before, there's always a need to be involved. And, the one thing we haven't talked about yet here for getting the teams in these companies to want to work together, but to absorb these processes, these best practices. And it's a 4-letter word. So I apologize to all of your listeners, but it's fear. Okay. And every individual has a fear of change, right? And all these things that are coming down the pipe, you have to be able to assess your team. Are they accepting the change right away? Are they rejecting the change right away? And those are two obvious signals that we can pick up on right away. You just typically look at somebody, you look at their interaction. The number one thing that kills transformation are all the people that are in the middle, right? They're unsure, and they're just not going to move in either direction because they don't understand how this is going to affect them personally. And the education and the training and the open dialogue and the critical thinking that goes on with everybody on your team can help to uncover that and get everybody to feel more confident about who they are, what they're doing. And you'll start to see that transformation will move in that direction. And just like the person who doesn't want to learn is refusing to learn, the person that refuses to accept change on a regular basis, they're people that perhaps we need to find a different role in the business for them, or help them to find a place that works for them, because it can't be very pleasing as an individual to work in an organization where you're rejecting everything that's going on.
Yeah, and it's even from their perspective, it's really hard. Like, some people just, are very unsure. But I like, you alluded to coming in and helping teams connect business goals to department goals to personal goals, because at the end of the day, like, we all want to get out of bed and do something purposeful. I think that's the number one reason people leave businesses. It's not money, it's that they don't feel valued. Anyway, this is a great conversation, Marc. For our listeners, what is one takeaway from all the things we've talked about today that you say that people could use today?
Stop focusing on the activity and focus more on the system. Focus more on the architecture of your revenue system. Too often leaders focus on how many phone calls, how many emails, how many marketing outputs are you delivering, so on and so forth. But if they're not producing value and being done the right way, then it's just a mess, and you're not going to produce the value that you need to move forward. All of these frameworks we talk about, go-to-market partners. I just also do a lot of work with the CRO Collective with a structured system for chief revenue officers. And all these systems are great, but if you don't help people understand the value and focus on that system and the process, you just have a lot of noise and activity that's not going anywhere.
Well, that's one of the best takeaways we've had. And I appreciate that. And I got to tell you, honestly, if I walk into one more worthless KPI meeting and have conversations about things that I know are not impacting the real problem, it drives me nuts on a daily basis. So side rant, ladies and gentlemen, sorry. So, okay, without further ado, just in the interest of time, your time is valuable. Our listeners' time is valuable. We have a mystery question, and we never talk about this. This is a bit of a surprise. I'm glad you mentioned CRO because it tends to be in that realm. So when I was looking at inviting you to the show and looking at your profile, and obviously I know you, I look at you as like this fractional, and don't take offense to this, like a fractional Mary Poppins. You come in and you help companies, and then, maybe once they're set, you do some reinforcement, but then you eventually leave and they're in a stable place from all of the wonderful things that you said that you do. So here's the situation. If you walk into a new company, what is the one ridiculously obvious thing that you can see on day one that these people actually hate each other? The different functions of the business just don't like working with one another.
I'm sorry, was that a question or a statement? Because that's 99% of the problem is that it's a people problem and it's a communication problem.
Is it that they don't like each other? Because again, like, I'm an old school marketer. I come from marketing and sales. We're not best friends. And we never have been. And we've tried to break down that wall for decades. Do you see that it's actual, marketing knows better, sales knows better, product knows better? Or is it just the lack of clarity that they don't see yet?
They love each other. They wouldn't be there doing this together if they didn't love each other. The problem is no different than you see in some families. It's communication, it's understanding. And, these assessments start to uncover the facts that many of these people need to articulate what they're talking about. And two things I'll close with. Number one, how do you help them with a system to understand that they can work better together? Because these old school architectures of revenue systems are typically designed where each silo has their own metrics around success, and they're incentivized differently. Their bonuses are different. And if you look at how they outline across the year of the business, they conflict and they're not really working together. And I don't have to go into all of them, but what we talk about in the CRO Collective is how do we put, a system together so that it operates smoothly. And I know for all the CMOs out there who don't want to hear about a CRO in a B2B business, you could be a CRO. It's not the title. And we also talk about the fact that a CRO is not somebody who came from a lifelong career in sales. It doesn't have to be. It's who can outline running this system across everything that we've talked about here in the last 25, 30 minutes. To move that forward. Because if the team works together as a team, the challenges and the reasons why people think they hate each other will go away. They'll come into meetings that are very productive. And the second piece, what I bring to the table, and I talk to many of my friends who do the same type of work. I say, look, if you could go in and say to your CEO, I want to do a personal NDA with each one of your executive leaders. And sometimes they're like, well, what are you talking about? We have an NDA. We know you can't take any of our information. It has nothing to do with the business. I want to have one-on-one conversations with all of the leaders in the organization where they feel that they can talk to me openly and honestly about the challenges that they're having in the business, things they feel they can't say to the CEO, right? How many CEOs wake up in the morning and say, is my team actually telling me what I need to hear? So if you can come in, again, going back to what I said about these teams getting smaller and smaller, and they only have time to look at each other instead of looking outside to say, how can we fix this? If you can come in and start to collect that information, and then you distill it as that advisor, consultant, person that's going to come in and relay this back to the CEO, and he or she may say to you, who said that to you? NDA in place with that individual. This is the type of clarity that these companies need to move forward and fix it, right? Whether the CEO just wants to do whatever they want to do, and everybody else who's supposed to actually get the work done is afraid to tell the CEO what the problem is, or people just don't have enough time. Oh, I wanted to tell you that 2 weeks ago, but man, 5 other things happened in the last week. This is where we can help the most. ICP and, customer time to value and branded demand and all these other things, they're tools. We'll get there. It'll get done. If the team's not working together and we're not educating everybody on how to accelerate their business, the frameworks will be there and they'll just sit on somebody's desk and they won't actually get applied.
I've never heard the personal NDA, and I love it. I love the trust. I love the clarity. And honestly, what does that tell you about the company? If a CEO, she or he, is on board with that, they have a healthy culture for sure. If someone's open to that feedback and they're not, I'm the boss, I know everything. So love that. You mentioned assessments a lot, so I assume you have a couple. Marc, where can people find you? Like, what's the best way?
Well, I think for this community, the best way is on LinkedIn. You could just find me, Marc Sabatini, and I'm either connected with Go-to-Market Partners or the CRO Collective, or a couple of the companies that I'm helping on a fractional basis. But I would say that LinkedIn is the best way. I'm happy to have conversations. And more importantly, if you feel like anything that I talked about today can help your business, just reach out and, let's have a conversation.
Thank you very much. I'm going to put you on the spot here. You mentioned assessments quite a few times. Is there a free assessment that people can go to your LinkedIn or go to your site and contact you? Is there any type of giveaway, we'll say, that you would provide?
I'll work on one, Chris. But again,
Gotcha.
Because I feel that this is so personal to every business.
Sure.
It's hard. I mean, we could put the Go-to-Market Partners assessment out. There's a whole bunch of assessments that we could put out there. But for me as an individual, I want to have that conversation first and learn more about the challenges that you believe you're having in your business before I just start throwing assessments at you, because there are so many. Let's find the right one or two that you can look at and say, wow, I really do have this problem. And how do we fix it?
Yeah, and not get an assessment that gives you the wrong report. So that wasn't staged, ladies and gentlemen. I was actually trying to get you something free, but I like your response, Marc. So Marc Sabatini, thank you very much for joining the show. Appreciate it. Another good show. I learned a lot today. Took more notes, I think, than most of the shows. Can't read my writing, so we'll talk later. But ladies and gentlemen, this has been another episode of GTM Get the Money Live. Marc Sabatini, thank you again. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good day. Go get some revenue, deliver some revenue for good and revenue for growth. See you.